Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the latest on the Russian offensive in the east of Ukraine, as we seem to be settling into a close to inevitable victory for Ukraine in the battle for Donbas. This does not mean the war will be over or anytime soon, but this latest battle has gone well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I'm going to draw on a few things here, but as with my recent videos on this particular topic, I'm going to be leaning heavily on Dr. Mike Martin again for the strategic assessments, because he's been on the money throughout this conflict, frankly. And last week, when I discussed a few things seemed to be in the balance. It looked like it was going well for Ukraine in terms of military objectives, but at the same time, Russia had a window of opportunity. The human infrastructure cost is proving catastrophic, of course, for Ukraine, but there's no way Ukraine can achieve a quick win. So their only chance is to bog the Russian forces down and then wear them out. And it seems to me reminiscent of the British plans during the Second World War to repel a potential German invasion. It was not based on repelling the invaders at our shores. It wasn't like, shoot them in their ships, lads. That wasn't going to work. That wasn't achievable. It was based on a series of lines of defence that would progressively weaken the invading forces until they could finally be defeated. The plans were war-gamed years later by British and German officers, because they, of course, were never put into actual practice. But there were war games run to test them out. And it was concluded that such an invasion would have devastated the south of England, but that the invasion would ultimately have failed. It is tragic to have to implement a defensive strategy that means accepting the utter ruin of parts of your lands in order to achieve a successful defence, but that's what it was. And so it seems with Ukraine. It's a long, protracted strategy that must accept devastating losses, but is the only way to actually succeed in the end. So we're just over a week before Russia celebrates, as many countries in Europe will, the end of the Second World War in Europe. They make a big thing of it. And they tend to link it to current military strength as well. Basically, Putin wants a big victory parade to sell to his people. What he's getting at best is a quagmire. This is his Vietnam. As numerous experts point out, in order to carry out a successful invasion, you need superior forces. The generally accepted ratio is 3-1. See this about a lot, rising to 5-1 for urban conflict. But in general terms, for Russia to have won the battle for Donbas under normal circumstances, they needed a numbers superiority of 3-1 to the defenders. They can't count on superior military technology because it's junk. As a little aside, I do wonder what the Indian and other governments are thinking of their decision to buy Russian-built equipment right now, when they can see it strewn, the wreckage of it strewn across Ukraine. But anyway, Russia needed the numbers, didn't have them. So their only chance was to make best use of the numbers they had with cunning manoeuvres. Unfortunately for Russia, though we may be able to describe their military using many words, cunning is not one of them. The problem has been that they withdrew forces from the unsuccessful attempt to take Kiev. This meant troops who were units that were badly depleted, morale shot. They tried to form them up into new units and attack again. Poor leadership structures, rubbish communications, and that low morale were acting very much against this. So instead of carrying out rapid manoeuvres to encircle Ukrainian forces, they just rolled out bit by bit, go and attack them, all right, then rolled out to be taken out by the Ukrainian military. Dr. Martin described it as Russia needing to clout, not dribble, but they dribbled. And it looked, to me, it was sounding like a Bruce Lee attack. Seeing the films, a load of guys about to attack Bruce Lee, you think, hey, he's in trouble here. But then they attack one at a time, instead of as a coordinated group. So he kicks one in the balls, he punches one in the face. They keep coming one at a time. Maybe two attack at once from either side. He dodges out the way and they punch themselves in the face. This is what Russia has done. Spread out convoys travelling along the roads being taken out by Ukraine's defences. Russia have made no gains these last couple of weeks, but they have been taking losses. In the past, Russian military campaigns were based on being able to throw a seemingly countless number of young men at the enemy until they were overwhelmed. Russia's got more limited resources these days, doesn't have the population to do that. they're running out of troops and they're wasting their armour. You know, running out of commanders as well. I think we're up to 16 Russian commanders now killed in Ukraine. All of the commanders who should never have been near the front lines, all a consequence of having to be there due to rubbish communications, poor morale, no real training. And that's not going to help. Like, you imagine you lose a senior commander, a battlefield commander. You've got to keep reordering the command structure, don't you? In an ongoing war? I suspect they're not managing this at all well. Dr. Martin even points out that Russian forces are having to use the roads for mobilisation, which of course makes them an easy target for ambush and artillery strikes. Not only can you see them much more easily coming, you know where they're going to go. If they want to get from here to here, well, they'll use that road because they're using the roads. So what we've been seeing this week is Ukraine increasingly taking the initiative and Russia seemingly stuck without any military objectives that they can realistically achieve, but a president who is demanding victories. The political situation is changing as well. You may have heard the British government talk about the war taking years, but that it will mean Russia being removed from Ukraine, including Crimea. They've been clear on that. Now, I will say a couple of things about this. First, that it is an official UK policy of restoring Ukraine's borders now, officially stated. That is the UK saying, we're not content for Russia to go back to their former occupation of bits of the east of Ukraine and then declare a ceasefire. They're saying, no, get back into your own land. That's not your land. I don't care about that rubbish referendum. That's not yours. But second, my question is, will this be supported by the wider Western alliance? See, Dr. Martin weighs in on this too by saying, you know, well, obviously we wouldn't have said it if the rest of NATO didn't agree. Now, ordinarily, I would say, yeah, of course, that makes sense. But our government are not exactly populated by the best and brightest. And our Prime Minister, at least, is still seen as a Russian asset. I do not know how many frank conversations we are actually involved in here. It is possible that Liz Truss said what she said without it necessarily being NATO policy. It may just be our policy. And given that Boris Johnson is still the Prime Minister, a policy we have one day can be changed another, or as Boris Johnson likes to call it, clarified, which basically means a complete U-turn. It'll be interesting to see if other NATO leaders with rather more credibility say something similar. President Biden is asking Congress for $33 billion for both humanitarian as well as military support for Ukraine. The President said, it's not cheap, but caving to aggression is going to be more costly. And that's clear enough. It's always been clear enough. If the West had booted out the initial incursion into Crimea 8 years ago, we would not have been where we are now. How often do we see that if you appease, if you take, oh, we'll give them this, they only want that, it's not a big deal, and then they'll stop. Never happens. And not only does it never work, you do end up paying a way higher price when you are forced to deal with it later. Biden is also proposing laws to allow them to sell off seized Russian oligarch assets. Finland and Sweden seem to have now decided to join NATO. Nothing yet on the timetable. Their governments, that is. I think there's a possibility of a meeting between the two in a couple of weeks' time, but that assumes that their parliaments approve of the move, because obviously that's required. I'm not sure when the debates will conclude on that. So we may find ourselves, this summer, if we think a few months ahead, we may find ourselves with Ukraine pushing further, maybe even eyeing up Crimea at that time. Remember their threat to take out the bridge linking it with Russia recently said, if we get a chance, we're taking it out. We may also find ourselves with 2 new NATO members. We are certainly seeing other countries bordering Russia being bolstered. The UK is sending thousands more troops to Eastern Europe, I see reports. Moves will continue to try and wean Europe off Russian oil and gas. That's supposed to be taking place over the course of this year. And also, as I've discussed before, and inevitably we'll keep coming back to because this is big, those stockpiled spare parts that Russia needs to keep its imported machinery working, that's going to start to run into shortages over the next few months. The authorities may be right that this war will drag on for a long time yet, years maybe. But the momentum is definitely with Ukraine. They seem to be getting their military tactics right. Yes, it's taken time, a long time. But so far, we seem to be in the phase of Ukrainian initiatives and Russian impotence. Lots of twists and turns can still happen, of course. Colonel Clumsy could take care of Putin, or just a good old-fashioned coup. It's not immediately obvious if the Russian public, however, would accept the defeat. I mean, what are we expecting? If Putin's deposed, does Russia just tell its people what really happened and say, look, you know, we're the bad guys here? I'm not sure I see that. Putin could decide that he's cornered and lash out with a limited nuclear strike. Again, assuming his military commanders would carry out the order. Who knows? But the conventional battles right now are not going Russia's way. They actually look like making net negative progress in this escalation. Remember, it was supposed to be, they already had captured part of Ukraine. They were escalating. The escalation has failed. They bombed a lot of buildings, killed a lot of people. But they're losing ground now, compared to even where they were at the start of this year. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And until next time, I'll see you later.